Candace Bushnell, who is the author of the Sex and the City series. A few years ago, it was in some of the major news sources that she had some pretty serious regrets. The regrets she had were that now that she was in her 60s, the lifestyle she had advocated of, being a downtown babe, think of the Sex and the City girls, Carrie and, I don't know the names of the other girls actually, just Carrie, but Sex and the City, that says it all. Their downtown cosmopolitan lifestyle. Carrie, who could only ever have flings with men, but never actually sew it up. Had an on-again, off-again thing with Mr. Big. And all the other girls had a lot of variability. Essentially a lifestyle that was glamorized. In any case, Candace has been touted that she has huge regrets over not only advocating that lifestyle, but actually not picking a lifestyle where she actually had focused more on family and children as opposed to career and being a boss babe, or just living a lifestyle with few attachments. I mention that because this is part 3 of my forecasts on what a Trump presidency is going to look like and how that's going to impact people. So recently in Congress, you may or may not be aware, and this is something you can Google if you like, but a more concerned congressman just congratulated Congress because the American debt has just reached $35 trillion. Not billion, trillion. And essentially what that means is that now almost 80% of the money that America brings in is being used to service the debt. Now, if you were to walk into a bank tomorrow and you wanted to apply for some money for any project, really, they would look at your income to debt ratio, how much your assets and your liabilities are costing you versus how much you make. And the debt to income ratio for acceptance for any kind of a loan is usually they look at you're not spending more than 50% on your accommodation. And, and there's another number of other factors, but essentially if America was going in to get a loan, they would be rejected. However, the one thing America has, which the average person can't bring into their bank, is very large boomsticks. I won't say the G word on politically correct YouTube. So further to what I was saying about Mr. Trump getting into office, and really it has to be a given because of the intensity and the furor that has gone, the constellation of stuff that has been happening around the assassination attempt and the trials and all these optics which are designed to make it look like someone is the dark horse, as I mentioned in the last video. And again, when you watch Trump speak, he's very compelling. He's like, Christians, go out and vote. Everyone go out and vote. Just let me in because I'm going to fix this. And what I've already mentioned to you is that the inherent problem America has is that they're kind of like, let's pretend someone who followed the Sex and the City premise. Let's pretend you're a 60-year-old woman, and I'm not saying there's a problem with 60-year-old women. I think I mentioned to you yesterday, I thought Betty White at 99 was fantastic, but that's me. But a 60-year-old woman can't go out and have children. marriage-minded men won't, or family-minded men rather, won't be looking at a 60-year-old woman. And from the perspective of all the things that one might look at if they wanted to build a larger life with a family, that wouldn't be something a 60-year-old woman could bring to the table. Now, mind you, if that 60-year-old woman had already had children, maybe she's a widow, maybe she's played her cards right and has a life that a man could come into or join his life to and make something more robust. That's another matter altogether. But let's look at America as a 60-year-old woman. It's always making war. So the Bible says, better to live in the corner of your roof than to live with a nagging woman. They have a perception of a lot of assets, but all of their assets worldwide, they have to be maintained. And very shortly, the world is not going to take the American money seriously from the standpoint of its viability to maintain anything. America's children, I'm not saying, whoever's watching this video right now, you're one of the good kids, but there's like, imagine 10 kids. You got 2 kids that, go off and become doctors or super productive people, etc., etc. But 8 of the kids are living on welfare, entitlements, have lots of baby mamas, are into illegal and reprehensible things, and they all live in a shack. It is a reflection on the parent. So when Mr. Trump comes into office, there's going to be a lot of, rah-rah, yay team. And initially he is going to make an announcement that will lower interest rates a little bit. As I mentioned, you're probably down to about 2.9% or something like that. And it's going to be touted as being super great. But what's going to happen is that I'm going to post in this video a link to, if you look in the description box, I'll post my American dollar video. It's going to cause that cliff that the dollar index is hanging on to begin falling apart. And the power of the American dollar will begin to decline. And if you look at that chart, a lot of the declines that happened in the chart over the years took 6 years to fully happen, but the biggest leg only happened in like a year. I think it was 1980 to 81, there was a big one. There was also one in 2006 to early 2008. Anyway, I'll put a link to that in the description. Feel free to check it out. So it's going to decline like that, and that's going to be noticeable. But it's going to happen quickly in financial terms. But the average person is just going to be like more and more irritated by it. Further to that, it's going to the next part that's going to happen is that there will likely be some protectionist measures that will be rolled out, primarily against China, because they're always talking about China. We just have to look at the past to see a person's future. And so, let's say, for example, you're China. Why do they take American dollars? Well, they take American dollars because they can buy oil and gas and that kind of stuff, and some raw materials. But in many cases, you'll notice that the Chinese are spending a lot of money on American companies and lands. Okay? Well, again, all you have to do is look at a person's past to see their future. If we reflect on the Ukraine war, what did America do to Russia when that unfolded? Whether you agree with the war or not, you just simply have to look at what they did. And what they did was seize Russian assets, bank accounts, properties, essentially worldwide, yachts. It was a big thing. I follow this one channel which tracks major yachts throughout the world. And at that time that was going on, it was very hilarious watching these rich guys quickly depart from American-friendly ports. And we're talking these mega yachts that are worth like $100 million. Because many of them were seized and some of them, were able to escape. So what will likely happen, and again, it's all my opinion, but I'm just basing this on logic and reason. What will likely happen is that there will be initially some serious sanctions put on China. There's going to be some kind of event where there's going to be some crankiness that happens between America and China. Okay? And the end result of that is likely America will start seizing Chinese assets. In which case there is going to be a small repass, whatever. It's going to be a small period of time where actually China won't deal with America. Because if you notice what's going on right now is the BRICS nations, that's Russia, Brazil, basically all South America, India, China, they're all making their own alliance. Africa, big one. They're all making their own alliance, and China's going to be able to easily switch gears because all those places are right now. You remember that analogy I told you yesterday about how school is coming back into session? Well, all those countries are basically entering grade 9. And so they're entering grade 9, and they all want fridges, furniture, domestic cars, domestic life. And China will be able to easily say, okay, America, if you're going to be cranky, we're not going to sell you our stuff. And there's going to be a bit of a cold strife between, like Cold War, if you will, between America and China. We're not going to go to war. There may be a slight skirmish over Taiwan, but we are not going to go to war. Because America won't get off the couch, and China is a powder keg with its people, because its people are very frustrated they can't get ahead in life. And so China is going to satiate those people by allowing them an ability to have a bigger life. Like China has quite a few cities that are very modern, that are empty. They've been capital works projects. They will do things like say, hey population, here's a nice house for you, and now you can go buy furniture and stuff for it, because we're going to be dealing with the Russians, the Africans, and all of South America. Mark my words. So that's what's going to happen there. And in Canada and in America, so what's going to happen in America is that all of a sudden America will have it's not that this tap is going to be turned off, but it's going to be a lot more expensive for Americans to buy Chinese componentry. Because we talked about manufacturing things like that, you can't just say, oh, I make cars. All those little parts that go into a car, at least half to 80% of what's in cars these days is manufactured in China. And we're dealing mostly with the circuitry and the fiddly bits that, like in America, we don't make fiddly bits anymore. And fiddly bits is how you put things together. Yeah, we've got foundries and things like that, but all the little stuff, we don't have that. Textiles, seats, instrumentation, blah, 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 all that stuff. And as I said yesterday, or in my last video, you got a taste of that in regard to the COVID crisis when you got a taste of that in the COVID crisis in regard to the shortage of computer boards to finish new cards. So that's going to be and that's going to go on. So as I said, the currency collapse doesn't happen quite overnight, but I feel that I don't think anything terrible is going to happen in 2025. We're just going to see a lot of rumblings and a lot of restriction. It's going to be sort of like a restrictor that's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. But then I think there's going to be some kind of black swan event. I don't know what that black swan event is going to be, but it will be some kind of black swan event that ultimately in 2026 there'll be a lot of restriction. And America will kind of like be that, as I mentioned in the last bit, they're going to be like that bully who comes back to push people around, and it's summer vacation, there's no one at the school. Now in Canada, our currency is going to appreciate against the Americans, but that's why America is going to be opening up its own fuel reserves, because it's going to have to rely more heavily on its own fuel reserves. It will purchase some of Canada's stuff, but it'll be at a discounted price. Because also what's going to be happening this time, which is going to exacerbate the problem, is, again, if you look on the chart, is the oil price is going to collapse. I know in the past I had mentioned during the COVID crisis that the oil price was going to really take off, but the chart has changed in regard to what's called the moving averages, and it's now in what's called the triangle. I may post a new video forecasting oil, but the oil price is going to collapse, which will be good for a deflated American dollar, but Canada has a resource economy, so it's important to know our dollar is going to rise against the American dollar, but on a global stage, it's not going to be doing that much better. Now there's a forecast, the same fellow who had forecasted that Trump would get shot, and he's a religious guy, he had a dream where in middle of Trump's term, there was going to be a lot of drama going on, and he was going to have to there was open prayer in the Oval Office or whatever. And whether that's real or a figurehead thing, I have no idea. All I can tell you is that Trump recently said, Christians, get out and vote. He said the not very quickly. So I'm not going to speculate, but that's all I got to say about that. So in any case, the last part of that prophecy is that Trump will oversee. There's going to be a retooling of the currency in North America. You're going to see a Canadian and American and Mexican currency be established. Because Mexico is kind of going to be like holding the bag. And what I mean by that is that Mexico is a growing economy, much like the BRICS nations, et cetera, but because they're very integrated with America from a manufacturing perspective, they're going to be left going, gee, what do we do? And so there's going to be a tri-currency that's going to be established. And it's likely going to be a currency that's based on something. Now, if you saw recently, again, I'm telling you things you may or may not know, but Trump recently went to a Bitcoin conference where he said he was going to advocate, a Trump presidency is going to be a Bitcoin positive presidency. So, and we see adaptation that's happening in South America. El Salvador and Argentina well, El Salvador for sure, and Argentina is really talking about it. It's adopting a Bitcoin standard where they can buy and sell Bitcoin. And if you understand anything about Bitcoin, unlike the American dollar, you can't print it at infinitum. It has to be earned. And through computation, it's very complex and it's a lot of voodoo. And I don't particularly believe in it long term myself, but you can't. There's an expression in trading which says the trend is your friend, and so you have to pay attention to it. Everything I've just mentioned to you is the trend is your friend. So you have to, it's not whether you agree with something, you just have to look at it and go, oh, I guess this is the deal. One of the biggest mistakes I've made in the current business that I'm in is that sometimes I impart my values on the people that I sell to and how I think. But if you can tell anything about these videos, I don't think like a lot of people in regard to, I'm a more value-oriented person. I tend to be more self-sufficient, and many more people in society are not that way. They like convenience, getting things in a hurry, no BS, all that kind of stuff. So that's neither here nor there. So yeah, that's what's going to happen is that there's going to be some kind of brouhaha that happens where Trump will be, there's going to be some kind of currency realignment. I'm not saying you're going to go broke, but you just have to look at the odds of what's going to happen. And so the last part of this, as I said, is that when I was talking initially about the fact that America is $35 trillion in debt, there's a very famous Hemingway expression, and it goes like this. It was more or less a comment on his life up to a certain point, and he said, I was going bankrupt very, very, very slowly until it happened all of a sudden. And that's how compounding works. So for years I said to friends, oh, America is so much in debt. But But even 10 years ago, they were only that debt was only 15 trillion. But that's the thing about compounding, is that you must appreciate that with a $35 trillion debt at even just smaller interest rates, it's going to double any time now. And no one in the world is going to take American money seriously when it doesn't mean it. Like, it currently doesn't mean anything, but there's some people who believe it does. And the nations that do take it, they think, oh, okay, I can use it for resources or to buy American property. But when America gives the screws and says, no, we're taking all that privilege back, the rest of the world is just going to be, they're going to look at America as a laughing stock. They're going to look at America as the bully who is standing there at the beginning of the new school. Like, he's already gone through grade 12, and he's the fat kid who showed up for the new year after, and he should have graduated and gone somewhere else, but he's there to bully the kids there, and everyone's looking at themselves going, who's this old weirdo? And that's what it's going to be. The world is going to look at America as the bully who's the old weirdo. So the only way all this stuff can happen as well is that because of the mental games that have been played to the population, the trauma bonding of the COVID, like the COVID crisis was an exercise in trauma bonding, where they, made you wear masks and injections and you couldn't go anywhere. That's trauma. And then to pull it back and give you freedom, they're going to have restrictions again. So it goes back and forth. And once you're in a trauma bonded situation, you will actually do anything for your captor. A good example of this is you can see a lot of, if you look closely at a lot of relationships that are like couples that are older. I'm not saying this is all of them, but you can really see it sometimes if you have either the woman or the man is very narcissistic, meaning that they, if a common thing with narcissistic people is that they trap people in relationships, meaning that they put them through a cycle of idealization, devaluation, and then discarding. But usually they keep them, they can't discard them because I've often noted that what happens is that, so these couples, they get together and everything seems wonderful and fine and really great. But then behind closed doors, the partner in that union, who is more controlling, starts devaluing, degrading the other partner. And the other partner, because they're very accommodating, they keep thinking about ways that they can make that relationship work better. And they keep trying and they keep trying. And so, and the controlling partner will then play a game where they will validate them and then will diminish them. Will validate them, diminish them. And so after a period of time, that relationship can actually become incredibly abusive, because the partner who's gone through that cycle of idealizing, devaluing, is always waiting for a perceived benefit, which in the case of the controlling person, they hardly have to issue it at all, and the other person is essentially trapped. And that's more or less what's going to happen with the lion's share of the American population, because this is rooted in a less introspective style of thinking. As I've said to you in the past, it's always the 80-20 rule. 20% of the people make 80% of the money in regard to dynamic organizations where free thought, like sales especially. But it's always the 80-20 rule in regard to, like, if you look at the vaccination regime, 20% of the people didn't take it. If you look at a lot of societal controls, 20% of the people find ways to circumvent the system more than the bulk of the population. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, and that's why it's important for the 80% always to, when you're looking for a leader, to always be testing them as to the quality of their leadership. And so, yeah, there's going to be some hardship in America, and because Trump is who he is and the way he talks, and they'll blame everything on the Biden administration. Everybody like, yeah, there's going to be some hardship. And so essentially what's going to happen is that there's going to be a new currency in about the third year of the Trump presidency. A new currency will be established in America, likely, again, Canada, American, and Mexico. You'll be able to trade your currency in, but there's going to be some devaluation going on there. And and then it will lay a new foundation. It will lay a new foundation. There's still going to be a lot of hardship that's going to be going on even at the end of the Trump presidency. And he did say something very interesting. He said, you know, if he gets in again, don't worry, I'll fix all the problems. And there's ultimately, if you look at the Trump prophecy, as far as there's a few Trump prophecies out there that talk about how the Trump dynasty would then become a thing. So, for example, they may rewrite the Constitution, have it so you don't have to have a president every 2 terms. They can't be president longer than 2 terms. And there may be a situation where the American population is so trauma bonded, they keep Trump in place, but then it's just Trumps that are in the leadership. So then you have Trump's son, and notice they keep talking about Barron as being very integral. And there's a very old book that you can look this up online. It's called Barron Trump, and it basically describes this whole scenario I've just described to you, and it also talks about putting America back on the gold standard. So again, I'm just a guy who's compiled a lot of data. These are things you can go look up. I'm not going to say that they're verbatim, but my personality type is that I'm in the Myers-Briggs personality. I'm what's called a visionary. The NTP is my personality. So I have the ability to see the outcome of cause and effect. I have plenty of shortcomings, make no mistake. I have a terrible time finishing projects, but I'm very good at looking at things that occur and are occurring, and then doing the math as to how they're going to shake out longer term. And so, yeah, this is the tail end of that thing. And so, in regard to my comments initially about Candace Bushnell, you know, look at America as being sort of like that. Candace isn't a terrible person. I'm sure if you sat down and had a cup of tea with her, she'd be lovely. But she's recognized that she was dealt a hand of cards that she played poorly, and if you go back to my my video on consistency, you know, in regard to, you know, America has been consistent at one thing. It's been consistent at taking advantage and making war. And if you believe, or I've lived long enough to know that karma is real. And whether you want to call it karma, or in the Bible it says, what you sow, you will reap. So if you hurt people, if you've been unfair to people, if you have done things which in your heart you know are wrong, but you chose to do them anyway, there is a cost to that. I've seen it in my life countless times, and by virtue of that same fact, the opposite is true. If you have a situation where you do good, you're sowing kindness, you're sowing charity, you're sowing giving, it's going to come in your life and make a big difference, and people are going to notice it. And especially the Almighty is going to notice it, and you'll be rewarded in ways you can't even fathom. So, I don't have a poignant phrase to say at the end of this video, but all I can say is that I think that wraps up my my opinion on the Trump presidency. So essentially, if you do have any questions, post them in the comments below. I'll give you my opinion. If you want to pose questions about what you potentially could do, I'm happy to give my opinion, not investment advice. And then you can be in a situation where maybe having more information is better than having too little. And that's what I'd advocate here. So short of that, oh, and again, if you'd like to subscribe, I would appreciate it. Getting a few more subscribers last week, had some more engagement, and I'll be bringing more fun things to talk about. That it's fun to talk about the future. There's nothing better than having an idea of how the future is going to break down, because then you can be prepared for it in ways that you don't have to be like losing your mind. We just have to be aware of things and how they're going to happen. And whether this deals with the larger macro picture of the economy, or it deals with how you manage your life personally. Thanks, folks.